Chapter 20, from 1824 to 1836, Section 9. The dignity and independence based on landed wealth is ever the chief allurement of the emigrant. Whatever his rank, he dreams of the day when he shall dwell in a mansion planned by himself, survey a wide and verdant landscape called after his name, and sit beneath the vineyard his own hands planted. To this common ambition the Crown directed its appeals. Acres, by hundreds and thousands, were offered for acceptance. The imagination of English readers overleaped a tedious interval of labour and disappointment. The generous impulse silenced the voice of fear and distrust. They took a last look at the sepulchres of their fathers and came forth to establish their children among the founders of nations. The distribution of wastelands, a most important function of colonial governors, has been a source of incessant perplexity and discontent. Sometimes they have been granted with ridiculous parsimony, and at others with scandalous profusion. Every minister has proposed some novelty. The regulations of one year have been abandoned the next, and the emigrant who loitered on his way found the system changed, which had induced him to set forth. The stewardship of the royal domain has been liable to difficulties peculiar to itself, beside the full average of official injustice and corruption. The endowment of emancipists with land, an American practice, was unsuccessfully revived in New Holland, and continued until the close of Macquarie's administration, when Commissioner Bigg recommended that no grant should be less than 320 acres. Instructions under the sign manual, given to the Governor of New South Wales, dated April 1787, were amplified by others in 1789. To detain the convict population and to provide them a future home were the chief ends proposed. The Governor was empowered to shorten their sentences and convey to each man, if single, 30 acres, if married, 50 acres, and 10 acres for every child. The Marines who accompanied the first expedition were encouraged to settle. The non-commissioned officers received 130 if married, 150, and 10 acres for each child. Private soldiers 100 or 130 acres. These grants were subject to quit rent of 2 shillings deferred for 5 years. The minister, anxious to raise the value of Crown land, directed reserves to be made between the allotments of equal extent, but the settlers persuaded the Governor or the Secretary of State that the intervals favoured the assaults of the natives, and the scheme was defeated. The King's instructions made no reference to the superior officers, but it was deemed absurd to grant the greatest gifts of the Crown to persons who had forfeited their lives, and deny them to gentlemen bearing commissions in the army. Ensign Cummings accordingly received 25 acres. The subsequent donations of governors compensated for this modest beginning, and the officers obtained large and valuable portions. One governor conferred a considerable grant on his expected successor, and was rewarded, when he surrendered the government, with a similar boon. Macquarie gave Lieutenant Colonel O'Connell and his lady 4,555 acres, to John Blaxland 6,700 acres. Sir Thomas Brisbane obtained 20,000 acres. 15,000 acres were given to Mr. Hart Davis. These were exceptions to the general rule. Official holders of land were interested in preventing extravagant grants, which lessened the marketable value of their own. The Survey Department, always in arrear, neglected to measure off the land, and an order, verbal or written, was deemed a sufficient title. Not unfrequently, the applicant changed his choice and migrated from one spot to another. The Governor often permitted the issue of rations and implements a second time, to enable indolent or insolvent settlers to till a second heritage. Trade was, however, more agreeable to many emancipists than agriculture. The officers located near them were willing to purchase their petty farms. Thus the small holdings were bought up, and the estates of the greater landholders were cleared of lurchers who preyed on their flocks. The small grants of land were productive of much real mischief and little benefit. They fell chiefly into the hands of spirit dealers, and the government permitted the purchasers to consolidate all such acquisitions into one large grant. In 1814, Macquarie issued an order threatening the resumption of grants for non-residents or alienation. These notices were rather a protest than an interdict, and were so understood. End of Chapter 20, being Chapter 3, from 1824 to 1836, Section 9.